be discussing the topic Idea of State and Kingship in Ancient India. The basic objective behind today's discussion is to give you an insight and understanding about the origin of the idea of state in India, the basis of kingship in India, the theories behind the origin of state, and the functions of the ancient Indian state. For the convenience of analysis, I have divided the entire discussion into a number of segments. We would first start with the stages in the development of the ancient Indian state. Then we would move on to the theories of the origin of state. We would be discussing three theories. One, the divine origin theory, the social contract theory, and the organic theory of the state. Then we would be discussing the functions of the state. And finally, we would move on to the question whether the ancient Indian state was a theocratic state or not. Now, students, we all know that the discipline of political science centers around the institution of state. What are the organs of the state, the functions of the state? We are familiar with the Western precepts about state, the origin of state. However, students, it is important to understand how did the ancient Indian state originate? What were the stages in the development of the ancient Indian state? Let us first start with the view of the renowned historian Romila Thapar. She believes that the state started with the lineage society. In fact, in the lineage society, the basic unit was the extended family under control of the eldest male member. The size of the family was dependent on the economic system, and it was the relationship which tied the families together. In fact, it was through kinship relationship that the institution of the family led to the creation of authorities and clans. However, soon differentiation came in within the society, and there came about a difference between the ruler and the ruled. Thapar observed that the shift from the pastoral to the peasant economy, population growth, complexities in the life of the people, the socio-cultural changes led to the emergence of the state system. R.S. Sharma observes that the present Indian state developed through 5 stages. The first stage was the age of the Rig Veda, which was primarily a period of assemblies like Sabha, Samiti, Gano, and Vidhata. The second stage, students, was the breakup of the tribal polity and kin conflicts between the Rajanya, Kshatriya, and the ordinary kinsmen. This stage saw the emergence of the Varna system. The third stage was the formation of the full-fledged state. This period saw the development of kingdoms like Magadh and Koshala. The fourth stage was the Mauryan state. We saw administrative centralization, principles of administration, and other economic activities of the state being proliferated. The fifth stage was marked by decentralized administration. The final stage, students, was the state of the proto-feudal polity which emerged during the Gupta administration. Now, these were the different stages in the development of the Indian state system. Altekar, however, observes that the family was the basis of the Indian state system. He believed that the state evolved in India in prehistoric times out of the institution of the joint family. The patriarch of the family was respected and obeyed, and social traditions inspired a similar respect for similar obedience to the head of the village and tribe, who generally acquired the status of chief and king. The expansion of the power of the kings led to the emergence of states and territories. Now, how did the origin of kingship develop? What are the various theories we speak about the origin of state in India? Now, we find notions of state and kingship being discussed in almost all texts, whether it is the Vedas, the Smritis, the epics, Arthashastra, and similar writings. It should, however, be noted, students, that the beginning of the state in India also coincided with the institution of kingship. Almost all the theories propounded by Western philosophers can be found in the Indian texts. Now, basically, we would be focusing on three theories of the origin of state: the divine origin theory, the social contract theory, and the organic theory of the state. Now, these three theories are also very popular in Western political thought. Let us start our discussion with the first theory, the theory of divine origin of the state. The theory begins with the notion that the state was a divine institution. Manu accepts the view that the state was the creation by God. In fact, it has been observed that the king has been created out of 8 particles of the Lord. Manu observes in the Manusmriti that when the world was not without a king and dispersed in fear in all directions, the Lord created a king for the protection of all. And because he is formed of fragments of gods, the king surpasses all other beings in splendor. So here we find that the Lord, the king, was created out of particles of gods. The Ramayana also believes and identifies the king to be a divine institution. It is stated that men approached Brahma, the supreme creator, to provide them a king, and accordingly, after all the gods spared a portion of their power, a being in human form was created, and he was made the king. The Agni Purana states that the king was the embodiment of Lord Vishnu, the god who sustains the entire earth. However, it is pertinent to note that though the divine origin theory speaks about divinity of the king, but this was never intended to justify irresponsible rule. In fact, it promoted the idea that we need to respect the authority of kingship. Coming to the second theory, the social contract theory. We are familiar with the fact that the social contract theory has been popularized by Western philosophers, Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and J.J. Rousseau. They provided a description of the state of nature, a contract, and the creation of the institution of state. We find similar ideas in the Indian texts also. In fact, just like Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau spoke about the state of nature, in a similar vein, we also find the notion of the state of nature, which was called Matsanaya, which connotes lack of order, with the big fish eating the smaller ones. Let us start with references of the social contract and an elected king in the various scriptures. We start first with the Aitareya Brahmana, the first reference to the election of the king. Now, the story behind it goes that the gods and the demons were fighting, and the demons were always victorious. Gods decided that they were losing because they did not have a king. So, they proposed to make Soma the king and did so when everyone consented to it. This was the first reference. However, the Aitareya Brahmana also has a second reference to an elected king. It says that Indra was made the king of gods because he was the most valiant and the most powerful. The gods, along with great god Prajapati, deliberated upon the choice of Indra because he was the most vigorous, the most strong, the most valiant, the most perfect, and who carries out best any work assigned to him. Therefore, Indra was installed as the king. Let us move on to the next text. The Shanti Parva of Mahabharata, which speaks about the existence of a contract, a compact for the creation of the state. In the Shanti Parva, we also find references to the state of nature, which refers to anarchic conditions, lawlessness before the creation of the state. To avoid the crisis of society, people collectively agreed to have a set of laws and to appeal to the god for a king who would protect them and provide law and order in society. It was also argued that without appealing to any divine agency, people on their own selected a person on whom authority was vested to ensure societal order. Coming to the next text, Arthashastra, which also speaks about the social contract theory. Arthashastra also begins with a description of state of nature, which was a state of lawlessness, where anarchy reigned, and then people elected Manu as the king. They undertook to pay a portion of their grain, which was 1/6 of their total grain, 1/10 of their articles, in return for the king to give them protection and order. The king guaranteed social welfare to the people by undertaking to suppress all acts of mischief, punishing the people guilty of crime. Even the inhabitants of the forest were required to pay a portion as taxes to the king. Thus, we find that the Arthashastra speaks about a contract, an agreement between the people and the king for protection and providing law and order. Now, what is the significance of the social contract theory as put forth in the Arthashastra? The contractual obligation is not intended to impose any kind of limitation on royal power. Moreover, the obligations put upon the people were to pay taxes on time so that the state could perform its welfare functions. It is argued that the king, who assures security and well-being to his subjects by eliminating wrongful acts, should never be disregarded. So there was a reciprocal relationship between the king and the people. The subjects would pay taxes. In return, the king would offer protection. However, these texts all speak about certain reference to the social contract theory. However, a more scientific explanation of the social contract theory can be found in the Buddhist scripture of Digha Nikaya. It has been observed that there was a time when life was perfect. People lived a blissful and a happy life. Gradually, situation and the conditions in society deteriorated, which led to decline, anarchy, law and order problems in society. Gradually, complexities arose, and the happiness in earthly life was completely destroyed. People gradually entered into a series of agreements among themselves and set up institutions of the family and the property. But then, the institution of the family and the property gave rise to some new problems. There appeared theft, there appeared other forms of unsocial conduct. Thereafter, people decided to choose a chief as a person who would provide them complete protection. This chief would be an elected one. He was called the Great Elect. The individual who was elected came to hold a number of titles. The Mahasammata, which means chosen by the whole people. He was also given another title, Khatiya, which was Lord of the Fields. The third title was Raja, which implied that a person who charms the people by means of dharma. Now, what was the nature of the contract? Digha Nikaya describes at length the nature of the social and political compact that happened between the elected ruler and the people. The political compact, Digha Nikaya notes, was preceded by a social contract. And this is very, very interesting. The stress shifted to the qualities of the king. It was believed that the Digha Nikaya text emphasized on qualifications needed to be a king. And it was on the basis of these qualifications that the most suitable person would be elected as the king. But then, Digha Nikaya also speaks about obligations among the people as well as the king. The king had several obligations. He was supposed to take care of the welfare of the people, ensure economic well-being. The people, however, had one obligation: to pay a part of their produce as contribution to the king. The rate of taxation was not prescribed. However, it lays down that the rate of taxation should be just. in order to enable the king to provide protection to the entire kingdom. Later on, it was found that the rate of taxation was limited to 1/6 of the total produce. However, the next important question which was raised was the Mahasammata, the great elect, was a king or a ruling class? Originally, the agreement took place between a single Kshatriya and the entire populace. At a later stage, students, it extended to Kshatriyas as a class. Towards the end of the story of the creation of the state in the Digha Nikaya, it is said that people led to the creation of a series or circle of kings and rulers. Thus, what we find is that the emergence of Kshatriyas as a class to protect the people emerged during the Buddhist period. Now, what is the implication of rulership as a class of Kshatriyas? It was intended to justify and strengthen the rule of oligarchies which existed in the Middle Gangetic Plains in the age of the Buddha, by giving them, these oligarchies, a cloak of popular support and thus sanctioning payment of regular taxes by the people. It is characteristics of the Buddhist theory of contract that it applies not to a single individual who is the head of the state, but to individuals who constitute the ruling class. Thus, in the social contract theory, as propounded in the various Brahmanical texts as well as in the Digha Nikaya, we find the existence of a compact between the people and the ruler. Next, we come to the organic theory of the state. The modern state, student, comprises of population, territory, government, sovereignty, and international recognition. Let us see whether these elements can be found in the idea of the ancient Indian state. The organic theory of the state emphasizes that the state is like an organism, and each organ has a specific function to perform. Just like the healthy functioning of the body depends on the healthy functioning of all the different organs, similarly, the proper functioning of the state is dependent on the different organs of the state. The Saptang theory of the state emphasizes on 7 organs of the state: Swami, Amatya, Janpad, Durga, Kosh, Dand, Mitra. Now, these 7 elements comprise of the state. The Swami refers to the king. Amatya refers to the class of ministers and bureaucrats. Janpad refers to territory and population. Durga refers to the system of fortification of the city. Kosh refers to treasury. Dand refers to the army system. And Mitra refers to alliances, the modern connotation of interstate relations. Among all these 7 elements, students, the king or the Swami is the most important. So the organic theory of the state focused on the different organs of the state. Let us now move on, students, to the functions of the state. Let us try to understand what were the functions of the ancient Indian state. Can they be compared to the modern functioning of the state? The state in India was regarded as the center of society and the chief instrument for providing welfare to people, and therefore, the area of operation of the state was quite comprehensive. The state was entrusted with the responsibility of protecting the people from internal security, to ensure that people do not and are not subjected to external aggression. The monarch was the enforcer of law, morality, dharma. However, as society became more complicated, the area of state activity also extended to cover a wide variety of human life. However, an important function of the state was maintenance of dharma. It was the duty of the state to promote dharma, arth, kam. The primary duties of the state was to protect and promote dharma, to defend the community, to ensure that the varnashram system operated, to ensure that there was coordination and proper support from all the social communities, and therefore the individual was able to realize his goals and aim in life. Not only this, the state was also the wielder of danda, coercion, punishment. It was the duty of the state to punish the lawbreakers. The state was also to offer facilities to different religions and sects to develop along their own lines and foster unity, morality, and righteousness. Thus, the state performed a number of welfare functions. Students, let's come to the final part of our discussion. Was the ancient Indian state theocratic? The question is important because we find the influence of dharma, we find the influence of the priestly class dominating over the affairs of the state. Does it make the ancient Indian state theocratic? What is a theocracy? Theocracy is a government operated by religious authorities who claim unlimited power in the name of God or supernatural forces. The word theocracy is derived from the Greek word theokrasia. Now let us see what do the scriptures say about whether India was a theocratic state in ancient times or not. The Aitharya Brahmana says, if the king does not employ a qualified Brahman priest, gods will not accept his oblations. During Raj Abhishek, that is coronation of the king was required to bow thrice before the Brahman. The Brahman was treated with respect. He was exempted from harsh punishments. But that did not imply he controlled the king. The king was not an instrument or agent of the priestly class. Laws, though regarded as divine, was based on dharma, social customs, and traditions. Now, was dharma a part of theocracy? Does it imply that state emphasized on dharma? That means it was a theocratic state. The king was considered to be a protector of dharma. But students, dharma was not a religion, but a code of conduct, a set of rules, norms to govern individual life. The duty of the king was to promote welfare and provide support to all communities and religions. He was not an agent of any one particular religion. It is true that philosophical concepts and ideals like dharma, purushartha, karma, punarjanma, incarnation were widely popular in ancient India. But students, that does not make the ancient Indian state a theocratic one. Now, what can be deduced from this entire discussion on the state and kingship in ancient India? We found that the scriptures speak about the notion of divine origin of the state, kingship. There are multiple views. One view states that the king was a divine institution and the king was the symbol of divinity. The other theories state that the state originated out of a contract between the people and the ruler. We also found a secular theory of kingship, as mentioned in the Digha Nikaya through the Mahasammata. But there is one point on which all the theories converge, and that the king never enjoyed the status of an absolute sovereign. He was not a dictator. He was not an autocrat. The popular precept, which was prevalent in ancient times, which was highly popular in European thought, that the king can do no wrong. However, it was not to be found in India. Let us now sum up our discussion on the idea of state and kingship. We started our discussion based on the stages of the development of the Indian state. We found how the institution of family led to the creation of the state. Then we spoke about three major theories, divine origin theory, the social contract theory, and the organic theory of the state. We also studied about the concept of state welfare while discussing the functions of the state, and we also found that the functions performed by the state in ancient India are quite similar to the functions performed by the state in contemporary times. Again, we also found that the state, the ancient state, though based on dharma, danda, righteousness, was not a theocratic institution. The king was powerful. The king had powers to control the people, to enforce dand, but he was not an autocrat. That's all for the concept of state and kingship in India. Thank you.